Drop what you're doing. Look under my keyboard. The words lit up on the phone screen of a young man on September 10th. It came from his boyfriend, Tyler Robinson. At first, it seemed cryptic, almost like a private joke or a small secret being shared. But when he slid his chair back, pulled open the drawer, and lifted the keyboard resting on the desk, his entire world shifted. Beneath it was a folded note. The handwriting was familiar, jagged, and hurried. The message inside read, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." His hands trembled as he read again. Unsure if it was a prank, a dark joke, or something terrifyingly real, he quickly snapped a photograph of the note and sent it to law enforcement. Moments later, his phone vibrated again. Another message from Tyler. What unfolded over the next hours was not just a shocking confession. It was a chilling descent into the mind of a young man who admitted to pulling the trigger in an attempted assassination. And through it all, his partner, the one person he seemed to care for most, was left torn between disbelief, fear, and heartbreak. This is a story of Tyler Robinson, a story hidden in plain sight, pieced together through digital messages, a handwritten note, and he unraveled a plan that shook everyone who came across it. The digital trail began with that initial note, but very quickly, it escalated into a series of intimate and damning text messages between Robinson and his romantic partner. After the photograph of the note was passed to investigators, Robinson reached out again. This time, his tone was softer, almost apologetic. "I am still okay, my love," he wrote, "but I'm stuck in Orem for a little while longer yet. Shouldn't be long until I can come home, but I gotta grab my rifle still. To be honest, I had hoped to keep this secret till I died of old age. I am sorry to involve you." The message landed like a stone in the pit of his partner's stomach. He replied immediately, unable to contain his fear. "You weren't the one who did it, right?" The triple question marks carried the weight of disbelief, of desperation for him to say no. But Robinson's answer was short. Final. "I am. I'm sorry." From that moment on, the conversation took a darker, heavier turn. The partner, still holding on to hope, asked again, "I thought they caught the person?" Robinson replied, "No. They grabbed some crazy old dude, then interrogated someone in similar clothing. I had planned to grab my rifle from my drop point shortly after, but most of that side of town got locked down. It's quiet, almost enough to get out, but there's one vehicle lingering." This wasn't a joke. It wasn't a mistake. Robinson was claiming responsibility for the shooting, and in chilling detail. He described how close he had come to retrieving the weapon he had hidden. His partner's messages revealed a mixture of confusion and dread. And then came the most basic, human question. Why? Why would he do this? Why would he put them both at risk? Why risk everything for something that could not be undone? Robinson responded with brutal clarity. "Why did I do it? I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out." His words carried the tone of conviction of someone who believed violence was the only answer. It was both justification and confession, wrapped in the same breath. But Robinson wasn't finished. He admitted to his partner that if he could retrieve the rifle without being seen, there would be no evidence left behind. He reassured himself, and perhaps tried to reassure his partner, that the act was clean, untraceable, and final. "If I am able to grab my rifle unseen, I will have left no evidence. Going to attempt to retrieve it again. Hopefully they have moved on. I haven't seen anything about them finding it." The message was clinical, detached, like he was talking about recovering lost property instead of a weapon tied to a shooting. His partner's heart must have been pounding, but the questions didn't stop. "How long have you been planning this?" Robinson's response was unnerving in its casualness. "A bit over a week, I believe. Just over 7 days." That was all the time it had taken for the idea to form, for the plan to crystallize, and for the act to be carried out. In the messages that followed, Robinson revealed the tactical mistakes he believed he had made. He had left the rifle near a bush, hidden in a towel, in the chaos after shooting. He admitted he had changed outfits nearby and didn't have the time or ability to carry the weapon with him. "I'm wishing I had circled back and grabbed it as soon as I got to my vehicle," he wrote. "I'm worried what my old man would do if I didn't bring back Grandpa's rifle. IDEC, if it had a serial number, but it wouldn't trace to me. I worry about Prince. I might have to abandon it and hope they don't find Prince. The casual way he spoke about abandoning the weapon contrasted sharply with the weight of what had just occurred. For him, the concern was not just law enforcement. It was personal. It was about his father. How the F will I explain losing it to my old man? That fear seemed almost as heavy as the crime itself. Throughout the messages, Robinson referred repeatedly to the weapon, his grandfather's rifle. He spoke of it with a kind of reverence, as though it were more than an object, but a family heirloom tied to his identity. Only thing I left was a rifle wrapped in a towel, he admitted. And then, with a chilling side note, he mentioned another detail. Remember how I was engraving bullets? The F messages are mostly a big meme. If I see notices bulge, ooh, on Fox News I might have a stroke. The juxtaposition was jarring. On one hand, he was confessing to a political assassination attempt. On the other, he referred to meme culture, internet jokes, and trivial engravings. It showed a fractured mindset, someone who crossed into violence, yet still spoke the language of online banter. But Robinson's focus quickly returned to the rifle. All right, I'm going to have to leave it. That really F sucks. Judging from the day, I'd say Grandpa's gun does just fine ig. I think that was a $2,000 scope. Dash. Even in the aftermath of violence, he spoke with an almost consumer-like tone, lamenting the loss of a scope, calculating the worth of equipment. Then, perhaps realizing the danger of leaving behind a digital trail, Robinson issued a demand: delete this exchange. But the partner did not delete it. Instead, it was preserved. It would become a crucial part of the evidence trail that pieced together Robinson's admission in his own words. As the night stretched on, the weight of reality seemed to settle more heavily on Robinson. His messages shifted from arrogance to fear, from confidence to regret. He told his partner that his father was demanding photos of the rifle, that his grandfather wanted to know who had what, and then, in an eerie coincidence, the federal authorities released a photo of the very rifle Robinson had described. A weapon unique and traceable. My dad wants photos of the rifle. He says Grandpa wants to know who is what. The feds released a photo of the rifle, and it is very unique. He's calling me RN, not answering. At that moment, the pressure was coming from all sides, law enforcement closing in, family questions mounting, and the weight of his own actions pressing down. There was another layer to Robinson's story, his family's political ties. Since Trump got into office, Robinson admitted, my dad has been pretty die-hard MAGA. It was a statement that underscored the tension within the family, a political divide that likely influenced Robinson's thinking, his justifications, and his guilt about losing the rifle. By the end of the message chain, Robinson revealed his next move. I'm going to turn myself in willingly. One of my neighbors here is a deputy for the sheriff. And then, the final message in the sequence, directed not at law enforcement, not at his family, but at his partner. You're all I worry about, love. His partner's reply was immediate and filled with emotion. I'm much more worried about you. But Robinson, already preparing for what was to come, offered one last directive. Don't talk to the media, please. Don't take any interviews or make any comments. If any police ask you questions, ask for a lawyer and stay silent. The confession was complete. The evidence was in black and white. And what began with a hidden note under a keyboard ended with a chilling surrender not just to law enforcement, but to inevitability. By the time Tyler Robinson had decided to turn himself in, the pieces of the puzzle were already scattered across law enforcement's desk. A handwritten note hidden under a keyboard. A string of digital messages that painted a confession in real time. A missing rifle that carried both personal and criminal significance. And at the heart of it all, a young man torn between radical conviction, family loyalty, and almost desperate attempt to shield the one person he called my love. Investigators pieced the timeline together. September 10th, the note discovered, the messages preserved, and the chilling admission that Robinson had fired the shot at conservative activist Charlie Kirk. The messages provided not just evidence, but insight and unfiltered look into Robinson's state of mind in the immediate aftermath of violence. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't hiding. He was confessing. But he was also bargaining with his partner, with himself, and perhaps with the weight of history pressing down on him. For his romantic partner, The emotional toll was staggering. One moment, he was receiving an ordinary text message. The next, he was staring at a confession to attempted murder. His responses revealed a frantic duality, pleading with Robinson to deny it, begging for clarity, and then finally succumbing to the realization that it was true. You weren't the one who did it, right? I thought they caught the person. Why? 3 simple questions. 3 increasingly desperate attempts to believe there was another explanation. But Robinson's answers left no room for hope. I'm sorry. No, they grabbed some crazy old dude. I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out. Each reply was a hammer, striking against a fragile wall of disbelief. The rifle remained a central theme in the unraveling narrative. For Robinson, it wasn't just evidence. It was an heirloom, a symbol of generational weight. His grandfather's weapon, tied to family history, wrapped in a towel and hidden near the scene. He spoke of it almost as if losing the rifle would be a greater personal failure than the crime itself. I'm worried what my old man would do if I didn't bring back Grandpa's rifle. The fear wasn't only about being caught by law enforcement. It was about disappointing his father, a man Robinson described as deeply political, a staunch supporter of Trump, and perhaps the figure whose approval he feared losing most. In that sense, the rifle wasn't just a tool. It was a thread that tied family, ideology, and identity together. Law enforcement, however, saw it differently. The rifle was evidence, unique, traceable, and now public. When federal agencies released a photo of the weapon, Robinson panicked. His words grew sharper, more frantic. The feds released a photo of the rifle, and it is very unique. He's calling me RN, not answering. The tension was suffocating. On one end, the government's net was tightening. On the other, his father's suspicions were mounting, and Robinson, caught in between, admitted defeat. I'm going to turn myself in willingly. But even as he prepared for surrender, Robinson's focus shifted back to his partner. You're all I worry about, love. Those words revealed a complicated picture. Here was a man admitting to a violent political act, yet clinging to tenderness in the same breath. A contradiction that made the entire story more unsettling for his partner. The responses were filled with fear and heartbreak. I'm much more worried about you. It was a tragic dialogue. One person spiraling into self-destruction, the other helplessly tethered to fallout. The final request Robinson made was not for forgiveness, but for silence. Don't talk to the media, please. Don't take any interviews or make any comments. If any police ask you questions, ask for a lawyer and stay silent. He seemed to know his story would not remain private, that once revealed, it would explode across headlines, debated in living rooms and on television screens. But in his last digital words, he sought to control one thing: his partner's voice. As investigators reviewed the evidence, what emerged was more than just a criminal case. It was a portrait of a young man's radicalization, the heavy shadow of family politics, and a collision of love with violence. Robinson had described the shooting as a necessary act, born from frustration and ideology. Yet in the aftermath, he was paralyzed by practical fears. Fingerprints, surveillance, a missing rifle, and his father's disapproval. He oscillated between bravado and regret, between declarations of purpose and confessions of fear. And through it all, his partner became both his confidant and his unintended witness. The tragedy of the story lies not just in the act itself, but in the intimate way it unfolded. This wasn't a cold, detached manifesto. It wasn't a distant recording found after the fact. It was live, real-time, text messages pinging between two people bound by intimacy, suddenly pulled into the gravity of violence. For Robinson's partner, every new vibration of the phone carried another revelation, another admission, another confirmation that the man he loved was the man responsible. By the time Robinson walked toward surrender, the story had already cemented itself. The note, the confession, the rifle, the partner's desperate attempts to undo the truth. It was all there, and as investigators moved forward, one thing became clear. Robinson's case wasn't just about one man and one act. It was about the ecosystem that surrounded him, the politics, the family dynamics, the radicalization, and the private relationship caught in the storm. What began with a hidden note under a keyboard ended with a series of irreversible truths. A man who confessed in his own words. A partner who held the evidence in his hands. And a rifle that symbolized more than just a crime. It symbolized legacy, conflict, and the destructive weight of ideology. You are all I worry about, love. In the end, those words echo louder than any political justification or tactical confession. Because beneath the headlines, beneath the courtroom debates, and beneath the investigative reports, there was a love story, shattered by violence, secrecy, and choices that could never be undone. And that, perhaps, is the deepest tragedy of all.